Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I'm already all sorts of excited for today's episode because we are joined by an incredible guest. This is an entrepreneur who has such a story of resiliency, of lifelong learning and growth, and I'm going to add adventure into the mix because she is someone who really embraces all the challenges, not only of life, but what it means to be an entrepreneur. We're going to learn so much from today's guest. Actually, before I tell you a little bit about her background, I'm going to share with you that when we came across her website, so her company name is Peak Learning Group. When we came across her website, her slogan or her subheadline is building talent with greater impact. And this is someone who just has committed her life to helping others be the best versions of themselves and get the most out of team environments. So with that tease in mind, let me tell you a little bit about today's guest. Her name is Lisa Weinberger. After 30 plus years in leadership, HR, and talent development across manufacturing, technology, healthcare, and financial services, Lisa launched a small business in executive coaching in 2022. Clients have sought her expertise to become exceptional leaders, accelerate career progressions, and build strategic, high-performing teams. As a leadership consultant and coach, Lisa focuses on mutual respect and trust, enabling clients to harness their internal strengths, optimize their effectiveness, and achieve their desired impact. Clients have also engaged Lisa in building strong teams, facilitating leadership development workshops, and augmenting HR programs and practices. Trust me, you're not just going to hear about business and high performance today. Lisa is way tougher than I am when it comes to cold weather. As a Bostonian, I look to her. She's based out of Minnesota. She not only skiing is a big part of her life, but she's a ski instructor and that she enjoys mountain biking. She's got quite some stories to talk me away from ever skiing myself. So we're going to get into a lot of good stuff today. It's going to fill you with energy and inspiration and a lot of lessons. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Lisa Weinberger. All right, Lisa, I'm already excited. I know you and I had a great chat already, but welcome officially to the show.
Thank you, Brian. I like being here.
Heck yeah. No, we're so grateful. And I know you bring so much energy and joy and adventure to the things that you do. But before we get into all the business stuff, take us beyond the bio. Obviously, you had such an incredible career across a lot of different facets of business. But who's Lisa? How did you get into all these things?
Oh, geez. Well, how did I get into all these things? Well, I started my career. Well, actually, all the fun stuff is I started it just out of college. When I was going to school way back when, I saw this advertisement at the Minnesota Daily, and it said, looking for ski instructors. And when I was young, my parents put us on skis because, it was fun. And I thought, how can I ski for free again? Because, as a college student, you can't afford skiing. And I went, well, I could be a ski instructor. So I started, applied to be a ski instructor at our local ski resort. And that got me skiing way back when. And I haven't stopped. I was addicted and I've been skiing ever since. Started as a ski instructor and still to this day, 35 plus years later. So you all can do the math. I am a ski instructor and a high school ski coach. So that's my passion for skiing, and it still continues to this day. And then I've roped into that. So that's where some of my coaching has come into play. And then I've continued on with all my passions of teaching and learning and talent development.
Yeah, Lisa, I love that overview because it really does show how passion-driven you are. And obviously, you and I know that by the time that this episode drops, for everyone around the world to tune into, you are fresh off an exciting trip to Iceland. So super excited for you to experience that. But I think it really speaks to the fact that your coaching and your entire business, it just seems like the coalescence of all the things that you really enjoy. Obviously, you come from a corporate background. You've worked within the 9-to-5 world and had a great career there. But I want to get into your mind because not a lot of people are willing to take that plunge after such an awesome career and say, you know what, I'm going to give myself even more work and start my own business.
Well, that's true. I spent a lot of time in corporate America, 35 years. And through that, I thought, well, I'm not ready to quit. But what happened is that I had got injured And through all that fun stuff that I love doing, and through the COVID time, I first had I have this propensity to get hurt, Brian. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's I like having too much fun. So, you talked about on the intro, I like to mountain bike and I like to ski. And those are kind of the things that keep me rolling. It's my stress relief, but it's also my passion of life. And so through that, I got COVID. I got, broke my left shoulder. And that's all right, And then I go ahead and break both my legs and my collarbone. Puts me in a wheelchair. A little bit of a bump in the road. And then I get laid off. And both of those times I got laid off. And so while in a wheelchair and laid off, I kind of went, well, this kind of stinks. But I thought, well, I'm kind of done with you corporate people. And so through that, I said, I'm not ready to quit though. And that was that opportunity for me to dig in and say, I want to give back somehow. And so I looked at the physical side of me from a resilience perspective and said, I have some work to do here. But also on the professional side, I want to look at an opportunity to be able to continue to give back in a different way. And that's how I decided to start my business.
Yeah, I love that backstory, especially because it's an ingredient. You're revealing it really early on here in our conversation today about resilience. And I love looking at the ingredients of success. It's something that I remember when I was a college student, I started a notebook where I would study all these successful business people we talked about in classrooms. And I would say, what are those ingredients? And everyone has different ingredients to their success, Lisa. Yeah. Clearly, resilience is such a core part of your journey and all the things that you've accomplished in your life. But let's use that to talk about the ingredients of leadership, because obviously leadership is such a core part of what you do. What are some of those key ingredients? I'd love to get it from your perspective, having seen all different types of leaders as well.
So key ingredients of leadership, a really good question. So if I think about all the leaders that I've worked with, I would say for me, the key ingredients of leadership begins with trust. I think that you need to trust your people, and you need to trust your colleagues and trust those around you. I think the core ingredient of leadership is trust.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lisa.
Sure. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to me, it's interesting the way that you talk about trust, because obviously we throw that word around a lot, but it just seems like the way that you operate within the realm of your work, that trust is that two-way street. It's on the leader first and foremost to trust the people around them, but also to build that trust from themselves to their team. So if you want to go deeper there, and I know that you've probably got some other ingredients as well, so let's keep this rolling.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about trust. There's this core element of trust that, I think of, I look at trust, and people can use that word as just real, yeah, I trust you. But I think it's deeper than that, right? I think that when I think about trust, I think that it's more around, I trust my people to do the right thing, and they trust me to do the right thing. I trust you I'm going to have your back. I trust you that you are going to, it's just such a big thing. And, you ask your team to take risks. I trust you're going to take those risks. I trust that I'm going to give you a lot of rope. I think that it is such a big thing from a leadership perspective. And when you really trust your team and you trust your people and you trust those others around you, they will take those risks. They will reach. They will aspire. They will perform. I think it's just such a big thing, and they will feel safe. That's why I think it's really a core component for an effective leader.
Yeah, really important insights there. I want to add on to that because even just hearing you talk about leaders, and obviously we can't talk about leadership without talking about the other side of the equation, which is the people that are in the realm and within the influence of a leader, which obviously we're talking about human dynamics here. And I think the important thing that I reflect on, I only worked in corporate America for 10 months after I graduated college. I was always meant to be an entrepreneur. You can't get the entrepreneurial bug out of me. And so part of me, Lisa, when I worked in corporate, is I looked around and I realized, holy cow, none of these people have ever been in those positions where they feel that autonomy to lead and to make executive decisions. I was lucky because I started my first business at 19. I had 20 people working for me and I was just a college kid. And so I was in that position to start making decisions and getting comfortable. So obviously we'll talk about reps. I'm sure that's going to be a part of our conversation today. But Lisa, for people in society, I guess I'll somewhat call society out right now as well, I just feel like we're taught to be followers as opposed to leaders. Where does the leadership development come into the world?
Well, first of all, how do you want to define a leader?
Ooh,
I think that
I want you to define a leader for us, Lisa.
So, there's two schools of thought on that. And so the current thinking on that is that everyone's a leader. So if you think about that, right? Because some, you're a leader in the work that you do today. Folks take leadership roles at home. They might take a leadership role in their community. They may not have the definition of leader, but they may have leadership roles in different things that they do, right? So does leadership mean I have people underneath me, right? Formal leadership responsibility, but I still may lead. Maybe I lead my community. Maybe I lead in my church. Maybe I'm a leader of the choir in my church. Maybe people might have different leadership roles. So it may not just be a formal leadership responsibility as it used to be defined, back in the old days. So different organizations define leadership in different ways, but some of the more, I'm going to say, current thinking today is that leaders are everywhere, and we all have different leaders' hats in different ways.
Yeah, really well said. I think it's an important distinction because obviously here we are in a business and entrepreneurship podcast. A lot of people translate that into the more traditional executive view of leadership, but you're absolutely correct. I think about, I'm someone, as an extreme extrovert, I'm a very social creature. I always need to be surrounded by people and working in team environments, and I view all of those as collaborations. I love working with my clients. I don't like the typical person to client relationship. And so I think it's really important for us to call these things out. But Lisa, I guess the biggest question with that in mind is, what are the leadership traits? How can I be an effective leader? If you're telling me, the listener, that I'm a leader by default, what must I do in that leadership development? What must I develop in order to be an effective leader?
Well, that's a good question. I think that what you must develop are those critical communication skills to be effective in what you do. So leadership development is this real big bucket of knowledge, and most leadership development offerings are experiential in nature, and it's development through coaching, development through experience, development through those key initiatives and endeavors to make you more effective at what you do. So depending on that work, so if you're an entrepreneur, and many of your listeners are entrepreneurs, what are those key skills that they want to get better at to make them more effective as an entrepreneur? That would be their leadership development. Okay, then I'll stop there for a second.
No, go ahead, Lisa. I'm loving this.
And so if you are, so depending on your role, right? And if you are a aspiring leader into a certain role in an organization, what are those key skills that I currently have today those key strengths that I'm really good at? Awesome, I can leverage those. And what are those new ones that I need to get that key thing that I want then those would be the ones I would want to develop or go after, or take a new opportunity in the company that I can acquire to make me the best candidate for that job. Then that would be the leadership development that I would want for that role. So I'm going to answer, it depends.
Lisa, you're coming on here, you're giving us lawyer answers, but I'm here for it because it comes with a lot of asterisks and disclaimers, but you're walking us down those paths. And I think it's really important because you're right, it is such a broad bucket. And I think what we're really doing is we're honoring the fact that leadership, it has become this big, vague, maybe heavy word in so many different circles. And we're really attacking the fact that leadership looks different. It looks different in different roles. It looks different for different people. And I think that's really cool, that recognition from you here, especially because you're in this space. And when I think about you being within the world of leadership, and this is obviously what you do for a living, and you help other people navigate this, part of me, and it's something I alluded to earlier, I'm a big fan of reps. I always think about repetitions. You know, we get better, and you talk about experiential learning. So much of this we have to experience to learn. Lisa, for all the entrepreneurs, and especially the entrepreneurial part of our audience that is thinking, well, how am I going to get these reps? I'm terrified because I've never had a sales conversation before. I've never had my own client project that I was the sole person in charge of before. How do we start getting these reps? Are there safe environments? Is it uncomfortable? Walk us through that.
Well, like anything else, we want to get better at being uncomfortable, right? You know, so just like me doing this podcast. So practice being uncomfortable is those reps. So depending on what it is, find those safe space and continue to practice the skill set to being uncomfortable. So that is the way that we all gain those experiences. You know, through leadership practices, the best way you become better at those things is continuing to do those reps, as you talked about. Same thing with skiing, right? Or mountain biking. It's continuing to do those things over and over and over again. And you identify those things that you get really strong at and leverage your strengths. Honestly, leverage the things you're really good at and identify folks that, you know, if you have a team, then identify others who are really good at other things and surround yourself with those. And so that's the benefit of working with teams if you have them. I'm really good at this. You're really good at that. Let's work together. You know, so then you have so if you're an entrepreneur, as an example, if you can team up with somebody else, you're really good at this. I have a partner, and you could partner with somebody else and leverage your strengths.
Yeah, Lisa, I'm going to put you on the spot here because you brought up skiing again. And I feel like it's such a good way to have you illustrate this point from your vantage point because you are very open. I love the answers to your guest questionnaire before we ever had the chance to meet here today about you're open to the fact that coaching in and of itself is new to you. And I think what's cool to have you on the show is we're not just talking about leadership, we're talking about coaching as well as, and actually I would argue coaching is a successful part of leadership. Can I translate the things that I know and guide other people on various journeys as well? So I think that's really powerful. You bring to your business and leadership coaching a background in ski instructing as well. What are some of the analogies and things that have translated there?
So I've been a ski coach for a really long time, and honestly, I was in leadership. I've been a leader for over 35 years, but then I translate. Then I take a look at, more formal coaching, and I got formal education in coaching. And then I realized that, well, there were a lot of things about formal coaching that I didn't know. And I was like, look at that. So sometimes I was doing more consulting or more mentoring on the business side of the house. But then when I look at, and then I reflect back, how can I then take that back into my ski coaching, working with young athletes or working with adults? And so some of those things, they go back and forth. So when I think about skiing, you tell people how to do something, or you provide, that's how I would used to do it. This is how you do X, or this is how you do Y, and you demonstrate that task. And then when you're working with instructors is different than when you're working with non-instructors. Does that make sense? Right. So instructors know how to do something because it's an instructor, but general public, they usually want you to tell them how to do it. So if I'm coaching now with a leader or an aspiring leader, I'm not going to tell them how to do it because they have it within. And so that's the similarity to working with like a ski instructor. They have it within. I need to ask, what do you think? Well, how do you want to do that? What are some ways and processes that you can do that? The same thing as coaching with a leader. Well, providing that space, providing those options, they have it within, but providing the opportunity for them to, reflect and identify those, ask those good questions to open the aperture for them to come up with bigger solutions that they had anticipated.
Yeah, that's really powerfully said and illustrated. You make me think back to when I lived in Massachusetts. I was on the path to getting my soccer coaching licenses, and I've got a few of those licenses. And I remember as someone who grew up playing soccer, a ball feels very natural at my feet. And so here I am tasked with trying to explain to a 5-year-old how to dribble a soccer ball. Well, you just shared with us, you can't explain that to a kid. And so what they taught us in that soccer coaching license course was put them in situations that the solution is for them to use the ball at their feet because it's in them and they'll figure it out. And that's the only way to get that touch on the ball. But Lisa, when I love looking into the work that you do, because it just seems to me like you have so many different tools in your toolkit to help bring these things out. I mean, right on your website, some of the certifications that I know that you have is use DISC in your work. And we've had guests on who have talked about DISC, but I will ask you, for listeners who aren't familiar with DISC, to talk about what DISC is, but also the 5 behaviors. I'm seeing kind of these interpersonal and self-awareness tools that you have. Talk to us about how those play into your work and why those are so important within the realm of coaching.
So with DISC, we're talking about styles, and we're talking about personality styles, right? So we're talking about the 4 styles about folks and how people approach the way that they work. So are people more directive? Are they more do they use more expression? So like me, in some ways where I talk with my hands. Do they tend to be more, I'm going to say more soft-spoken? Or do they tend to be more analytically driven, more detail-oriented? So and those are behaviors that you can see in people. And when you see those kinds of behaviors in folks, and DISC allows you to see those kinds of behaviors in folks, then that allows you to adjust the way that you ask questions or adjust the way that you respond to folks to allow for a better connection. And that's the really nice thing about DISC, is that when you understand how you approach your thinking, then because you process things a certain way, you can't assume that other people do it the same way that you do. And so it's important to know thyself first, and then you can then better understand others. Because if you know how you think, it doesn't necessarily mean others think the same way you do. So that's a really important thing about DISC. And so that's that piece. And then some of the other assessment tools, there's some other things around 5 behaviors, which is a really good thing for team effectiveness. And the foundation of that one, interestingly enough, is trust.
Yeah, Lisa, I'm going to use that then, because now we've been talking leadership, but now you introduce us to team effectiveness, which I know that is a core part of the offerings that you bring to the marketplace and help people with. Let's start with defining it. What is team effectiveness?
Oh, no. Well, so with being an effective team, there is the elements around the foundation of trust, and like anything else, right? We talked about leadership effectiveness, and all of this begins with that whole core around an effective component around trust, right? And so the piece is that teams have to have this foundation of being able to trust one another and being able to work effectively together. And if you don't have that, then nothing's going well. And then there's several, and again, it all depends on models, right? There's lots of different ways that things can work, and but you've got different components beyond trust. And you've got whether a team can be accountable to one another, whether they can work through conflict, whether they can commit to each other about, I'm going to do this. Are you going to do that? Are we going to do yes, no? And then whether or not they can accomplish results. And so those are some key ingredients of effective teams. But again, it all starts with trust. And if they don't trust one another, then nothing's going to work.
Yeah, for sure. Lisa, I've actually never asked anyone this question. I'm going to ask it to you because when we're talking about the context of leadership, but now also team effectiveness, I feel like societally we have this expectation that the leader sets the culture. And again, bringing back a soccer analogy is that, the captain is the one who sets the tone for the team, or maybe the head coach is the one that sets the tone for the team. I've been a member of teams where I'm just like, no, it doesn't matter. If the captain's not tuned into what the players want, the players are going to set the tone for the locker room. What's your approach to that? What's your take on that as to how much it's a question of top down or bottom up? Which way do we go about in successfully implementing a team culture in the way that we hope to achieve it?
So for team effectiveness, definition of for a team to be effective, that means the team is aligned around vision, mission, and trust. And if they don't trust their leader, the team's not going to be effective. That doesn't mean that there might not be one-on-one connectedness between individuals on the team, but the definition, by and large, of a team being effective includes the leader. And if they don't trust their leader, or they think their leader's a dodderhead, or they think the leader doesn't have their back, or they think the leader's going to throw them under the bus, the team is not going to be effective because they're not going to work collectively as a team to be able to accomplish those goals that the organization's putting in front of them, or, run over hot coals because they don't believe in the leader. So the team's not going to be effective if they don't believe in that leader. They're not going to do it. They're going to jump at the first time they can. They won't be.
Yeah. Well, then, Lisa, let me put you on the spot here because I know you've got a background in HR. We've all been in those corporate situations where we do like these team bonding activities. And I remember the first,
by the way.
Yeah. And I want to get some examples there because I think back to my first ever one. So it was probably the summer after my freshman year of college. I had an internship and our summer bonding was beach volleyball. And when I looked around, I was like, man, we are an innovative tech company. None of us play volleyball. We all love technology. It's not what we do in our spare times. Talk to us with that HR hat on. And obviously you have extensive background here in understanding humans and teams and leadership. What are some effective ways for us to create this culture? And I'm going to throw one curveball into this equation as well. As also, if you can find a way for that to apply to global teams. I know a lot of listeners to the show, and myself included, all of my teams are remote teams. How can we embed those into the world of today's remote culture?
So I think that it's hard, right? And so to do the team bonding issues that you're talking about, back in I'm going to go like you were talking about, back in the old days, we used to walk on like planks and do things like this and stuff like that. But even on my team, some of them didn't want to participate. So then the question is it effective? I would say no, it's not, because not everybody wanted to play ball, right? So I think that for something to be effective, everybody has to want to participate and engage, because the whole purpose of those games, or whatever we want to call them, is to build engagement, camaraderie, and trust. And if people feel that they're being forced, then you're missing on all of those, right? There's no engagement, there's no camaraderie, and people feel like they're being made to do something. So then you're losing on all of those pieces. So what can you do where people feel that they're engaged and that you're building camaraderie and it's building trust? So those are the pillars, right? So ask. I would start with ask. What do you want to do? And if it's a remote team or a global team, then say, what can we do as a collective where we can feel engaged and connected? Because that's the whole goal, is to build this connectedness and this engagement. And if that means that you can't bring people together and you need to keep people remote because it's a global, because it's sometimes hard to bring people together across the globe because of the nature of is difficult, then maybe it's those, you start with, coffees, remote, Zoom coffees, or silly games. Like I used to do those, what are they called? I used to do these games online. I can't remember the name of it. My kids used to play it at school. These quiz games, and I would do a meeting and we'd do these silly quiz games, and I'd have people come up with what the topic they wanted to be, which is something silly. It was innocuous. It was just silly and fun. It was just a way to try to get people engaged and be relaxed and do things like that. And I did it all via Zoom because my team was 100% remote. But I was just trying to create some kind of an engagement in some kind of a way that everybody could choose to participate, and try to build some trust. Did it work? I don't know, but when I left, they missed it. So maybe it did work.
Yeah, Lisa, I'm going to rope this back in because it's something you joked about earlier in our conversation where you said it depends. And here we are. I think that what you're really revealing in today's episode is that way too often we as business owners, entrepreneur leaders, whatever the hats are that we wear, we always put a lot of pressure on ourselves to have these answers. And so many of your answers, not only it depends, but you just revealed the biggest tool in your toolkit, which is just ask the others. We don't have the answers, and that's perfectly okay. And that is a successful sign of a leader, is acknowledging that and soliciting that feedback and communication from others. So I love the fact that that's the way you took that. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I think that's an important insight, right? Because as leaders, you shouldn't be expected to have all the answers. You have a wealth of knowledge among your team. And there is the adage that, even as a facilitator, remember when you walk into a room, is that all the people in the room have way more knowledge than you could ever hope to have by you as yourself. There's the collective knowledge in the room. It's way more than you. So as a leader, if you can remember that as well, it's a really important lesson. And then try to gather all those insights from everybody else, and you will do so much better. And so that's the thing. Tap into that knowledge, especially today now when you have all these other generations coming in. The thinking and everything is so different. Tap into that knowledge base and see what else. You'd be surprised what you can learn. I'm learning even so much from my kids nowadays. It's shocking. I hate to admit it.
Well said. No, I feel the same way. My niece and nephew, they're 6-year-old twins. And Lisa, I swear, the things they think of, even with technology, and I'm very technologically inclined. And when I see the way that they handle an iPhone or an iPad, and I'm just thinking, didn't even know that button was there. Didn't even know that shortcut was available. So really well said. I think that's such an important takeaway and a piece of insight from you, because you've dealt with people for a really long time and you've worked with incredible high performers in all different capacities and been a leader yourself. And I haven't tooted your horn as much as I possibly could. I know you're super humble in a lot of ways, but I know that listeners know you're wicked smart, as we say in Boston. You've got your PhD. There's so many credentials that go behind it. But I think that the humility that you put on display, not only in this episode, but humility is clearly a core part of the way that you lead and the way that you operate yourself. So I don't know how you're going to top this advice that you've already given us in today's episode, but I love asking this at the end of episodes, because it is a broad question and you get to take it in any direction you want, which is, what's the one takeaway? Knowing you have a direct line of communication to thousands of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs all over the world tuning in right now, what's that one piece of advice that you want to leave listeners with today?
I'd start laughing. I would say, as entrepreneurs, my one piece of advice is that our resilience is the essence of being human. Dig into your resilience and the possibilities that are in front of you and go for it.
Yes, I love that advice, Lisa, and it is so appropriate coming from you. You are such a shining example in so many of these things that we talked about here today. So I'm excited for listeners to check out your business. I think it's incredible, the work that you're doing, the brilliance that you share with the world through all the ways that you show up as a business owner, as one of us, a fellow entrepreneur, but also in the way that you service your clients. So drop those links on us. Lisa, where can listeners find out more about you, Peak Learning Group, and all the great things that you're doing to help people?
So you can find me at peaklearninggroup.com, and you can directly locate me at lisa@peaklearninggroup.com.
Yes, so listeners, you see how accessible Lisa is. You can find that link down below in the show notes. It's peaklearninggroup.com. Super easy to remember, but you can just find that link down below in the show notes wherever it is that you're tuning in to today's episode. You can click right on through. You can also email Lisa directly. We don't put that in the show notes, but you just heard it from her right here. So definitely reach out to her personally. We're also linking to her personal LinkedIn. So if you just want to have another amazing entrepreneur and leader in your network, or you want to thank her for this episode, most listeners are way too shy to ever do that. You will stand out. So Lisa, on behalf of myself and all the listeners around the world, thanks so much for coming on the show today.